Say that name again. The command did not sound loud, yet it rolled across the royal hall and silenced every whisper. Hundreds of wolves stood frozen beneath towering stone arches as moonlight poured through stained glass windows, painting silver patterns across the polished floor. At the center of it all stood Evelyn Hart, the mute Omega no one had wanted, no one had defended, and no one believed belonged there. Her hands trembled at her sides. Her breathing came fast and shallow. For 23 years, not a single word had ever left her lips. Not one. Yet every eye in the kingdom was now fixed on her. Across the hall, King Lucian Blackthorn slowly rose from his throne. The ancient Alpha King was a figure out of legend. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched by silver and eyes that seemed older than the mountains surrounding his kingdom. Generals feared him. Elders obeyed him. Entire territories changed their laws when he spoke. Yet at that moment, something unfamiliar flickered across his face. Not anger, not authority. Fear. Evelyn had never seen fear in anyone so powerful. The crowd noticed it too. Murmurs spread like ripples across a lake. The royal council exchanged uneasy glances. Several elders looked suddenly pale. They all knew what had happened. They had heard it clearly. Moments earlier, while standing before the throne awaiting judgment, the mute Omega had spoken. One name. Just one. A name no one should have known. A name that had vanished from every book, every scroll, every piece of recorded history centuries ago. Evelyn barely understood how it had happened herself. The sound had simply escaped her, as natural as breathing, as if the word had been waiting her entire life to be spoken. Now her pulse thundered in her ears. She stared at the king while memories she did not recognize flickered at the edges of her mind. Strange dreams, ancient forests, silver stars hanging over ruins older than any kingdom. For years those visions had haunted her sleep. For years she had awakened confused and frightened. Tonight, standing beneath the gaze of the most powerful alpha in the world, those fragments suddenly felt important. Lucian descended the steps of his throne one slow step at a time. No one moved. No one dared interrupt. Even the guards seemed uncertain. The distance between them shrank. 20 feet. 15. 10. Evelyn could hear the faint rustle of his dark coat. She could smell cedar, winter air, and something ancient she could not name. The closer he came, the louder her heartbeat became. Then he stopped only a few feet away. His silver eyes searched her face as though looking for someone else hidden behind it. The silence stretched. Endless. Heavy. Then the king spoke again, his voice quieter this time. Who told you that name? Evelyn opened her mouth. The entire kingdom seemed to hold its breath. For the first time in her life, she wanted to answer. But before she could make a sound, a forgotten memory flashed behind her eyes like lightning, and suddenly she realized this was not the first time she had stood before Lucian Blackthorn. It had happened once before, long before either of them should have been alive. Evelyn stumbled backward as the vision vanished, leaving only the cold stone floor beneath her feet and the weight of hundreds of eyes pressing against her. The royal hall seemed farther away now, its towering pillars blurred at the edges of her vision. She could still feel the echo of something ancient brushing against her thoughts, like fingers trailing across the surface of a forgotten memory. Lucian remained motionless in front of her. His silver eyes never left her face. Around them, the silence had become unbearable. No one understood what they had witnessed. No one understood why the king himself looked shaken. Yet Evelyn understood even less. She lowered her gaze, trying to steady her breathing. The familiar panic she had carried since childhood tightened inside her chest. Whenever attention turned toward her, fear followed. It always had. Long before this night. Long before the palace. Long before she ever stood before a throne. 3 days earlier, Evelyn Hart had been standing alone at the edge of Grey Hollow Pack territory. Autumn wind moved through the pines, carrying the scent of rain and distant wood smoke. The settlement behind her prepared for the harvest moon gathering, the most important celebration of the year. Lanterns glowed along the pathways. Families laughed together. Music drifted through the evening air. Evelyn watched from a distance as she always did. No one invited her closer. No one expected her to join. At 23 years old, she had become a living reminder of disappointment. An Omega without a voice. An Omega whose wolf never fully awakened. Children stared when she passed. Adults lowered their voices. Some pitied her. Others avoided her completely. The elders called it an unfortunate burden. Evelyn called it loneliness. She wrapped her worn gray coat tighter against the chill and turned away from the celebration. The forest had always felt kinder than people. Trees never demanded explanations. Rivers never asked questions she could not answer. Deep among the pines, she followed a narrow trail she had walked hundreds of times before. Fallen leaves crunched beneath her boots. Above her, pale moonlight filtered through the branches. For a while, the quiet soothed her. Then she heard it again. The voice. Soft, distant, familiar. It came only in moments when she was alone. Never loud enough to understand completely. Never clear enough to follow. A whisper carried by the wind. Evelyn stopped beside an ancient stone marker, half swallowed by moss. Her pulse quickened. The voice seemed stronger tonight. She pressed one hand against the weathered surface of the stone. Instantly, warmth spread through her fingertips. Strange symbols hidden beneath the moss revealed themselves for a brief second before fading again. Her breath caught. She had never seen those markings before. Yet something inside her recognized them. Not from memory. From somewhere deeper. Somewhere older. A sudden flash crossed her mind. Silver stars. Endless darkness. A man standing beneath a sky that held 3 moons instead of 1. The image disappeared as quickly as it came. Evelyn pulled her hand away. The forest fell silent once more. She looked around nervously. Nothing moved between the trees. Nothing should have frightened her. Yet a feeling settled over her shoulders like an invisible cloak. A feeling that someone had been waiting for her. Watching. Listening. And far beyond Gray Hollow, beyond mountains and rivers, beyond every border marked on any map, the ancient Alpha King had already begun his journey toward the territory where a forgotten Omega was unknowingly walking toward the center of a destiny neither of them could escape. The next morning arrived beneath a sky the color of brushed steel. Evelyn woke before sunrise inside the small cabin that had belonged to her grandmother. The old woman had passed away 2 winters earlier, leaving behind little more than worn books, a rocking chair beside the fireplace, and memories that refused to fade. The cabin sat nearly a mile from the center of Gray Hollow, tucked between towering pines where few people bothered to visit. Evelyn preferred it that way. The silence felt safer. She lit a lantern and moved through her familiar routine. Water from the hand pump outside. Firewood stacked beside the stove. Tea steeping in a chipped ceramic mug. Simple tasks. Predictable tasks. The kind that kept her mind occupied when strange dreams threatened to follow her into daylight. Yet today felt different. The uneasiness from the night before remained. Even as golden light slowly filtered through the trees, she could not shake the feeling that something had changed. While cleaning dust from one of her grandmother's shelves, her attention drifted toward an old wooden chest tucked beneath a blanket. She had opened it dozens of times over the years. Inside were faded photographs, handwritten recipes, and journals filled with careful script. Nothing unusual, nothing mysterious. At least that was what she had always believed. Drawn by an instinct she could not explain, Evelyn knelt beside the chest and lifted the lid. The scent of cedar and aged paper rose immediately. Her fingers moved through the contents until they stopped on a thin leather-bound journal she had never seen before. Confused, she pulled it free. The cover bore no title. Dust coated the edges. It looked impossibly old. Evelyn sat beside the window and opened it carefully. The first pages were blank. So were the next several. Then, near the center, she found writing. Her grandmother's handwriting. A chill moved down her spine. The entry was dated nearly 15 years ago, before her grandmother had become ill, before Evelyn's life had fully settled into isolation. She scanned the page slowly. Most of the words described ordinary events. Harvests, weather, pack gossip. Then one sentence stopped her cold. When the stars return to their ancient positions, the silent child will remember what the kingdom forgot. Evelyn stared at the line. Her heartbeat quickened. She turned the page. More entries followed, each stranger than the last. References to forgotten names. Warnings about hidden truths. Mentions of a king who carried a burden older than the kingdom itself. Her hands trembled. She had never heard her grandmother speak about any of this. The woman had always been gentle, practical, and kind. Not someone who believed in prophecies. Yet the words felt real. More real than they should have. A sudden knock rattled the cabin door. Evelyn nearly dropped the journal. No one visited. Not anymore. She quickly closed the book and crossed the room. Through the small front window, she saw Elder Nathan standing outside. Grey Hollow's oldest council member rarely left the village center. Seeing him here immediately felt wrong. Evelyn opened the door cautiously. Nathan offered a strained smile, but worry lingered in his eyes. He held a folded piece of parchment in one hand. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then he extended the message. Evelyn accepted it. The royal seal stamped across the wax was impossible to mistake. Her pulse stopped. The ancient Alpha King had announced an unexpected visit to Grey Hollow. And according to the notice, he would arrive before the next full moon, only 2 days away. As Evelyn looked down at the seal, the voice she had heard in the forest whispered once more through the corners of her mind. This time the words were clear. He is coming. For the next 2 days, Grey Hollow transformed into a place Evelyn barely recognized. Workers hung lanterns along every pathway. Fresh banners appeared across the village square. Storefront windows were polished until they reflected the autumn sunlight like mirrors. Excitement spread through the territory faster than wildfire through dry grass. The Alpha King rarely traveled beyond the capital. Most wolves spent their entire lives hearing stories about him without ever seeing him in person. Now he was coming here, to Grey Hollow. The announcement dominated every conversation. Evelyn heard it at the market. She saw it in the faces of neighbors passing by her cabin. Even the air seemed charged with nervous anticipation. Yet beneath the excitement lurked something else. Unease. The elders met behind closed doors for hours at a time. Guards appeared along roads that normally stood empty. Visitors from neighboring packs began arriving a full day before the king's expected arrival. None of it felt normal. Evelyn noticed every detail. The journal remained hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her cabin. She had reread its pages countless times over the past 48 hours. Each reading left her with more questions than answers. The strange entries felt less like stories and more like warnings. Again and again, one message repeated itself in different forms. When the forgotten truth awakens, the kingdom will remember. Those words lingered in her thoughts as she walked through the village on the evening before the king's arrival. Golden leaves drifted through the air. Lanterns flickered to life one by one as dusk settled over Grey Hollow. Music echoed from the town square, where preparations continued late into the evening. Evelyn kept her head lowered as she passed through the growing crowd. Familiar whispers followed her. They always did. Some people glanced away quickly. Others stared openly. A few offered sympathetic smiles. Most simply pretended she was not there. She had learned long ago not to let it hurt. Or at least she told herself she had. Near the edge of the square, a sudden chill brushed across her skin. She stopped walking. The sensation felt wrong. Out of place. Like stepping into cold water on a summer day. Around her, the sounds of conversation seemed to fade. Her heartbeat quickened. Then she saw him. Not the king. Someone else. A man stood beneath a large oak tree across the square. He wore a dark traveling coat and kept his hands folded behind his back. Nothing about him should have attracted attention. Yet the moment Evelyn looked at him, a strange certainty settled inside her. He was watching her. The crowd moved around him without noticing. Children ran past. Merchants carried supplies. Nobody acknowledged his presence. Only Evelyn seemed aware of him. Their eyes met for a brief second. His were pale silver. Not blue. Not gray. Silver. The exact shade she had seen in her dreams. The stranger offered the faintest nod before turning away and disappearing into the crowd. Evelyn's breath caught. She pushed forward instinctively, trying to follow him. But by the time she reached the oak tree, he was gone. Completely gone. She searched every direction. Nothing. No sign he had ever been there. A distant bell rang from the village center, announcing the final hour before nightfall. Slowly, Evelyn looked toward the darkening sky. Clouds drifted apart overhead, revealing the full moon rising above the forest. For an instant, she thought she saw 3 stars shining directly beside it. 3 unusually bright stars arranged in a perfect triangle, the exact symbol she had glimpsed during her visions. Then the clouds shifted again and the stars vanished. A familiar whisper brushed through her thoughts, closer now than ever before, almost as if the voice stood beside her. Tomorrow, everything changes. And somewhere beyond the forest, traveling beneath the same moonlit sky, the ancient Alpha King was already less than 50 miles away. Morning arrived beneath a sky washed clean by overnight rain. Sunlight spilled across Gray Hollow in bright ribbons of gold, catching on wet rooftops and turning every drop of water into a tiny spark of light. From the moment Evelyn opened her eyes, she knew the day felt different. The strange pressure that had lingered for days remained, heavier now, as though the world itself were holding its breath. Outside her cabin, the village was already awake. Wagons rolled along muddy roads. Merchants arranged displays of autumn produce. Children ran between lantern posts decorated with silver ribbons. Every conversation seemed to lead back to one subject. The king would arrive before sunset. Evelyn stood on her front porch for several moments, watching the distant movement between the trees. A cool breeze stirred her dark hair. Somewhere overhead, a hawk circled lazily through the pale blue sky. Everything looked normal, yet nothing felt normal. She reached beneath a loose floorboard inside the cabin and retrieved her grandmother's journal once more. The worn leather felt familiar in her hands now. She opened it carefully, turning page after page until she found a passage she had overlooked before. The entry was short, written in hurried handwriting that slanted sharply across the paper. There will come a day when the Silent One meets the king of forgotten things. On that day, memory will awaken. Evelyn stared at the sentence. Her pulse quickened. The words felt impossible. Yet every strange event seemed to be pulling her toward exactly that future. She closed the journal and pressed her fingertips against the cover. For the first time, she wondered if her grandmother had known far more than she ever revealed. By afternoon, the roads leading into Gray Hollow had become crowded. Wolves from neighboring territories gathered near the village square hoping for a glimpse of the famous ruler. Excitement hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Evelyn avoided the center of town as long as possible. She spent hours wandering familiar forest trails, hoping distance would quiet her thoughts. Instead, the whispers returned. Not loud, not frightening, simply persistent. The same voice she had heard for years. Only now it sounded stronger, closer. Sometimes she thought she almost recognized it. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, a distant horn echoed through the valley. Every bird in the forest seemed to fall silent at once. Evelyn froze where she stood. Another horn followed. Then another. The sound rolled through the trees like a wave. The king had arrived. She could feel it before she saw anything. The air itself seemed to shift. Reluctantly, she made her way toward the village. By the time she reached the outskirts of the square, hundreds of people had gathered. Lanterns flickered to life as evening shadows stretched across the ground. Wolves lined the roads in orderly rows. Children stood on crates for a better view. Elders adjusted formal robes with nervous hands. Then the procession appeared. Dark horses moved slowly through the village entrance. Royal banners fluttered in the breeze. Guards wearing silver crests rode alongside elegant black carriages. The crowd erupted into respectful cheers. Evelyn remained near the back, half hidden behind a large maple tree. She had no desire to be noticed. Yet as the procession passed, one carriage caught her attention. Its curtains remained drawn. No one could see inside. For a brief second, the fabric shifted. A gap appeared. Through that narrow opening, Evelyn saw a pair of silver eyes looking directly at her. The world seemed to stop. The noise of the crowd faded. The distance between them vanished. Those eyes were unmistakable, ancient, familiar, and filled with recognition. Then the curtain closed. The carriage continued forward. Around her, no one appeared to notice anything unusual. But Evelyn's heart was already racing, because somehow, impossibly, she knew the king had been searching for someone. And for one brief moment, she feared he had found her. That night, Gray Hollow did not sleep. Lanterns glowed across the village long after sunset, casting warm circles of light onto the winding roads and wooden storefronts. Laughter drifted through the cool autumn air as visitors celebrated the arrival of the royal procession. Yet inside her small cabin, Evelyn sat alone beside the fireplace, unable to find peace. The image of those silver eyes refused to leave her mind. She had felt something pass between them during that brief moment. Recognition, not curiosity, not surprise. Recognition, as though the king had expected to find her. The thought made no sense, yet it followed her like a shadow. The fire crackled softly. Outside, wind moved through the pines. Evelyn opened her grandmother's journal once more, turning carefully through the fragile pages. Most entries remained cryptic, filled with symbols and references she did not understand. Then a folded piece of parchment slipped free and landed on the floor beside her chair. Her breath caught. She had never seen it before. The paper looked older than the journal itself. Its edges had yellowed with age. Carefully, she unfolded it. A hand-drawn map appeared across the page. Forests, rivers, mountains, and near the center, a circle marked with a symbol she immediately recognized. 3 stars arranged in a perfect triangle. The same symbol from her visions. The same symbol she had glimpsed beside the moon. Beneath it, her grandmother had written a single sentence. When the stars align, follow the path beneath the forgotten stone. Evelyn stared at the message. A strange warmth spread through her chest. The words felt less like advice and more like instructions left specifically for her. Before she could study the map further, a sharp knock echoed against the cabin door. She jumped. The sound came again, louder this time. Setting the journal aside, Evelyn crossed the room and opened the door. Elder Nathan stood outside, illuminated by lantern light. His expression looked troubled, more troubled than before. He glanced over his shoulder before speaking. "The council is requesting your presence tomorrow morning." Evelyn frowned slightly. Nathan rarely addressed her directly. The council never requested anything from her. He hesitated. "There are concerns." That single word tightened something inside her. Concerns usually meant blame. It usually meant she had somehow become the subject of another uncomfortable discussion. Nathan sighed heavily. "Some of the elders believe the unusual events of the past week may be connected to you." Evelyn lowered her gaze. Of course they did. Whenever something strange happened, attention eventually found its way to the silent Omega living at the edge of town. Nathan's expression softened. "I do not agree with them," he said quietly. "But the meeting will happen regardless." He handed her a formal summons bearing the council seal. Then he left without another word. Long after he disappeared into the darkness, Evelyn remained standing in the doorway. Above the treetops, clouds drifted across the moon. For a brief instant, she thought she heard the familiar voice again. Not a whisper this time. A warning. Trust no one. A chill moved down her spine. She closed the door and locked it. Sleep came slowly. When it finally arrived, the dreams returned stronger than ever. She stood inside a vast stone chamber illuminated by silver fire. Ancient banners hung from towering walls. A man stood across from her, his face hidden by shadows. Yet she knew those eyes immediately. Before she could reach him, the chamber dissolved into light. Evelyn awoke just before dawn with her heart racing and one certainty burning in her mind. Whatever awaited her at the council meeting, it was only the beginning. Grey Hollow's council hall stood at the center of the village like a relic from another age. Built from dark stone and weathered timber, it had witnessed generations of decisions, celebrations, and judgments. Evelyn approached its heavy wooden doors just after sunrise. The air felt cold against her skin despite the clear sky overhead. Villagers lined the pathways leading toward the building, whispering among themselves as she passed. Some looked away quickly. Others watched openly. Their expressions carried curiosity, concern, and something else she had come to recognize over the years. Suspicion. The moment she entered the hall, conversation stopped. Elder Nathan stood near the front beside the long council table. Several other elders occupied their seats, their faces unusually serious. Sunlight streamed through narrow windows high above, filling the chamber with pale golden light. Evelyn remained near the entrance, unsure why she had been summoned. A tense silence lingered before Elder Marcus finally rose from his chair. His silver beard reached the center of his chest, and his sharp eyes rarely missed anything. Today those eyes rested entirely on Evelyn. He began speaking slowly, carefully choosing each word. Strange events had occurred throughout the territory during the past week. Unusual dreams reported by multiple villagers. Ancient symbols appearing where none had existed before. Animals behaving unpredictably. Several elders believed these occurrences were connected. Evelyn listened quietly. She already knew where the conversation was heading. Marcus continued. Witnesses had seen her near the old stone marker in the forest shortly before the symbols first appeared. Others claimed unusual lights had been visible near her cabin at night. A murmur moved through the room. Evelyn lowered her gaze. None of it sounded reasonable, yet she knew arguing would change nothing. Then Elder Nathan stood. His voice carried firm authority. He reminded the council that no evidence connected Evelyn to any wrongdoing. He pointed out that she had spent most of her life avoiding attention rather than seeking it. Several elders nodded reluctantly. The discussion continued for nearly an hour. Questions, theories, concerns. Through it all, Evelyn remained silent. Not because she chose to be, because silence was the only language she had ever known. Eventually, the council reached no conclusion. The meeting seemed ready to end when the large doors suddenly opened. Every head turned. A royal messenger stepped inside wearing the silver crest of the crown. Instantly, the atmosphere changed. The messenger carried a sealed scroll and approached the council table without hesitation. Elder Marcus accepted the document and broke the seal. As he read, color slowly drained from his face. The room fell silent once again. When he finally looked up, uncertainty had replaced confidence. The message contained a direct request from the king himself. A private gathering would be held that evening within the royal residence established outside the village. Several local representatives had been invited. One name appeared at the very top of the list: Evelyn Hart. Shock rippled through the chamber. Marcus reread the name as though expecting it to change. It did not. Across the room, Nathan stared at Evelyn with visible disbelief. No explanation accompanied the invitation. No reason. No details. Only a single instruction written beneath her name. She must attend. As whispers erupted throughout the hall, Evelyn felt the familiar warmth stir inside her chest. The same strange sensation she had felt beside the forest stone. The same feeling she experienced whenever the mysterious voice appeared. Deep inside, she already knew this invitation was not an accident. And as the villagers reacted around her, another memory briefly flashed across her mind. A vast hall of silver stone, 3 stars burning above a throne, and a voice she almost recognized speaking a promise she could not yet remember. The invitation remained folded in Evelyn's hand long after the council meeting ended. Villagers parted around her as she stepped outside, their conversations lowering into cautious whispers. The news had already begun spreading through Grey Hollow. People who had barely acknowledged her existence for years now watched her with open curiosity. Some looked confused. Others looked uneasy. A few seemed almost afraid. Evelyn kept walking until the sounds of the village faded behind her. She followed a narrow trail toward the forest where the familiar quiet usually helped calm her thoughts. This time it did not. The king's request echoed through her mind with every step. Why her? Of all the wolves in Grey Hollow, why would the most powerful ruler in the kingdom ask for a silent Omega who spent most of her life hidden from the world? The question followed her beneath the towering pines and across the carpet of fallen leaves. Eventually, she reached the ancient stone marker. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the branches above, painting shifting patterns across the weathered surface. The strange symbol she had seen before was gone. The stone appeared ordinary once again. Yet something drew her closer. She rested her fingertips against the cool surface. Instantly, a pulse of warmth traveled through her hand. The forest vanished. For a single breathtaking moment, Evelyn stood somewhere else. She saw a vast courtyard built from silver stone. 3 brilliant stars burned overhead despite the daylight sky. Tall banners moved in a gentle breeze. Voices echoed through the distance. Then she saw him, not as the king she recognized now, but younger somehow. His face carried the same sharp features, the same silver eyes, yet there was no crown upon his head. He stood beside a fountain filled with glowing water, smiling as though he had just heard wonderful news. The sight struck her with unexpected emotion, a feeling of loss so deep it stole her breath. Then the vision shattered. Evelyn stumbled backward. The forest returned. Her heart raced wildly. She pressed a hand against her chest, struggling to understand what she had seen. None of it felt like imagination. It felt like memory. As evening approached, she returned home and prepared for the gathering. The royal residence occupied a large estate on the edge of the village, surrounded by lantern-lit pathways and carefully tended gardens. By the time she arrived, twilight had settled across Grey Hollow. The estate glowed beneath hundreds of lights. Elegant guests filled the courtyard. Council members, pack leaders, merchants, and visiting dignitaries moved through the gathering in formal attire. Evelyn immediately felt out of place. Her simple gray dress seemed insignificant beside the polished elegance surrounding her. A royal attendant greeted her at the entrance. Without speaking, he offered a respectful bow and guided her through the crowd. The deeper they traveled into the estate, the quieter everything became. Eventually, they reached a private corridor far removed from the celebration. The attendant stopped before a pair of carved wooden doors. He opened them and stepped aside. Evelyn hesitated. Warm light spilled from the room beyond. Taking a steadying breath, she crossed the threshold. The chamber was empty except for one person standing beside a tall window overlooking the moonlit forest. The moment she entered, he turned toward her. Silver eyes met hers across the room. Neither spoke. Neither moved. Yet Evelyn felt the strange pull immediately, stronger than ever before. Then, for the first time since arriving in Grey Hollow, the ancient ruler smiled. And somehow, deep within her heart, it felt like coming home. The smile lasted only a moment, yet it changed everything. Evelyn stood motionless near the doorway as Lucian Blackthorn regarded her with an expression she could not understand. It was not the distant courtesy of a ruler greeting a guest. It was not curiosity. It was recognition. The same impossible recognition she had seen in his eyes when the royal carriage passed through Grey Hollow. Moonlight streamed through the tall windows behind him, outlining his silhouette in silver and shadow. Neither spoke. The silence that had defined Evelyn's entire life suddenly felt different inside this room. It no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Lucian slowly approached. His footsteps echoed softly against the polished floor. When he stopped a few feet away, his gaze lowered briefly to the small silver pendant hanging around her neck. It had belonged to her grandmother. She had worn it every day for as long as she could remember. A strange emotion flickered across his face. Surprise. You still have it, he said quietly. Evelyn's breath caught. The words made no sense. How could he possibly know about the pendant? Lucian seemed to realize the question in her eyes. He glanced toward the window, as though searching distant memories. There are things hidden from history, he said. Things buried so deeply that even kings forget them. The warmth inside Evelyn's chest returned immediately, stronger than before. Around her neck, the pendant seemed almost warm against her skin. Lucian noticed her reaction. His silver eyes narrowed slightly. You have been dreaming, he said. It was not a question. Evelyn froze. He continued. Ancient halls. 3 stars. Places that should not exist. Her pulse quickened. Every description was accurate. She had told no one about those dreams. Not a single person. Yet somehow he knew. The room felt smaller suddenly. The distance between reality and memory seemed to blur. Lucian turned toward a nearby table where an old wooden box rested beneath a cloth. Carefully, he removed the covering. Inside lay a collection of ancient objects. Maps. Fragments of stone. Pieces of silver etched with symbols. Symbols identical to the ones she had seen on the forest marker. Evelyn stepped closer instinctively. One piece in particular drew her attention. A circular silver disc engraved with 3 stars arranged in a perfect triangle. The moment her fingers brushed its surface, the world shifted. Light flooded her vision. She saw a great city of silver towers stretching beneath a sky, filled with constellations she did not recognize. She heard voices speaking a language that somehow felt familiar. Then she saw herself standing beside a younger Lucian in that impossible place. Not as strangers, not as ruler and outcast, as people who shared a history the world had forgotten. The vision vanished. Evelyn gasped softly and staggered backward. Lucian caught the edge of the table, steadying it as though he had expected exactly this reaction. His expression had grown serious again. The memories are returning, he said. Outside the chamber, distant music from the celebration drifted faintly through the night. Inside, everything had changed. Because for the first time, Evelyn realized the mystery was larger than Grey Hollow, larger than the kingdom, and larger than the dreams that had haunted her for years. And somewhere beyond the reach of memory, a truth older than history itself was beginning to wake.